Jill Lepore is a David Woods Kemper 41 professor of American history at Harvard, who is also a staff writer at The New Yorker. Beyond her analytical brilliance, perhaps her greatest strength is her ability to speak to a general audience. She's one of those rare academics who can make people who are not historians think that the past really, truly matters. Her writing is powerful, infused with a fascination for the lives people led and the greater meaning behind their accomplishments, or in some cases, their lack of accomplishments. A prolific writer, her new book, Book of Ages, was longlisted for the National Book Award. It tells the story of Jane Franklin, Ben Franklin's sister. Jenny and Benny, as they were known as children, scampering through their impoverished home in colonial Boston. Professor Lepore resurrects a picture of Jane out of wisps and whispers, a life that otherwise would have fallen between the cracks of history, as it did for 3 centuries. But Jill brings us this shadow sister who did not sign the Declaration of Independence or discover electricity, but instead toiled in poverty as a laundress and a mother to 12 children. But in between, she kept a lifelong correspondence with her brother, a lifeline to another world. He loved no one longer, she loved no one better, she writes in a New Yorker piece that ingeniously interweaves the lives of Jane Franklin together with her own mother's life and her own. Her mother, the thwarted artist, would nudge her bashful, bookish daughter Jill to get out there and explore the world. We are so grateful that her mother knew how to push and that she knew how to listen to become one of the most important public intellectuals and important storytellers of our day.
Thank you so much, and I think we should all celebrate pushy mothers. There's never enough occasions to do that. I am so happy to be here and thrilled at the nature of this event. I often, when I've come over to speak to Nieman Fellows, feel that I'm very much on the wrong side of the podium. So I would just like to make a suggestion, although I think the postgraduate year is a brilliant one as well. I think for the next 75 years, the Harvard faculty ought to really learn from the Nieman Fellows a bit more. I would really love to see that. I would love to have more opportunities for those of us on the faculty to hear more about what you all do and the world that you all live in. It's just a real treat for those of us who are so cloistered here to have you here on campus. And I can't really sort of speak enough to what it means in a classroom to the undergraduates and the graduate students here at Harvard to meet with journalists from all over the world and to get your perspective. The ways in which it enriches everything that we do here at Harvard, I think, can't really be celebrated enough. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about something I'm sure none of you have thought about at all recently. Like, has anybody heard of Edward Snowden? Or I feel like I don't really need to kind of situate the present-day crisis over privacy and security and secrecy in the world. What I really wanted to do, though, is to give you a little bit of a vantage on something I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is the history of this dilemma. We have lately, I think, a notion that privacy has been shifted due to profound historical change. This idea that a kind of timeless human right, our very privacy, is threatened or maybe even dead here, mourned in a funeral for privacy. Privacy, of course, isn't dead, but nor is it timeless, and that's something that we often forget. I want to give you a brief account of its history, but I think it's important to remember when thinking about the history of privacy that it can't be understood without thinking about the history of publicity. That's something that I think we often miss. So I want to show you a very little clip that leaves my jaw dropped.
The miraculous is everywhere, in our homes, our minds. We can share every second in data dressed as pixels. 1 billion roaming photojournalists uploading the human experience, and it is spectacular. So why would you cap that? My iPhone 5 can see every point of view, every panorama, the entire gallery of humanity. I need to upload all of me. I have the right to be unlimited. Only Sprint offers truly unlimited data for iPhone 5.
What the hell is that? I have the right to be unlimited? What? Is nobody noticing this claim that we have a right to publicity, that it is almost an elemental human right? I think we can't, so my point here is we can't understand the dilemma about privacy absent a consideration of the history of this bizarre assertion of the right to publicity. Exploring the history of privacy requires I think, investigating what is essentially a paradox of a culture obsessed at once with being hidden and with being seen. Historically, understanding this paradox requires thinking about three different ideas, and that's really what I want to do today. As I see it, there's a transformation in which these three ideas have moved in a particular direction. My argument here is that much that was once mysterious became secret, and then it became private. That we need to understand the paradox between publicity and privacy, we need to understand the relationship among mystery, secrecy, and privacy, and their different claims historically. Mystery is what we can't know but are asked to believe. Secrecy is what is known but not to everyone. Privacy is what allows us to keep what we know to ourselves. So think about these three ideas. We could define them differently, but these are rough and ready definitions. Mystery is the oldest of these ideas. It's an antique idea, and for most of its history, mystery has been a religious idea. Immortality, for instance, is a mystery. Secrecy is what happens when mystery yields to science. So, for instance, scientists want to uncover the secret of aging. And one way of understanding privacy, as it's most commonly used today, is that it's mystery made secular and secrecy made into a matter of law. My end-of-life decisions, for instance, I think are private. So I think you can see here a transformation, a change over time historically, again, in which much that was once mysterious became secret, and then it became private, which is why we are so alarmed about it. A good deal of this shift, for instance, concerns our bodies. I just want to give you some examples of this transformation. Think about conception, what happens inside a woman's body, the most hidden of places. Anciently invoked as one of God's mysteries, conception was then studied by anatomists as the secret of generation, and most recently, the act of conception and the prevention of that act have been defended against intrusion by citizens using the language of a constitutional right to privacy. Much that was once mysterious became secret, and then it became private. Uncovering this secret and then making a claim to its privacy had to do with technologies. You can make this argument about many different kinds of things. Take, for instance, the circulatory system. What was once mysterious became secret, and then it became finally private. As with conception, the idea that our blood is private, we can't, for instance, be forced to take a blood test, is contingent on, first, its demystification. It needs to move from the realm of the religious to the realm of the secular. And second, to the exposure of its secrets through the lens of science. For something that was once mysterious and known only to God to become a secret, it needs to be visible, be made visible by new kinds of lenses. Only then comes privacy. In other words, the case for privacy comes after and never before the act of exposure, which is why, again, we're so buggy about it. The case for privacy always follows the emergence of new technologies that make visible what was once secret. The case for privacy always comes too late. So, if you are with me so far and are willing to accept this basic premise that there's been this historical shift from mystery to secrecy to privacy, how are we to understand, what's even driving that shift? How are we to understand it? The forces that drive this kind of a shift are largely technological and are interestingly technological. I could use here another kind of short triptych to illustrate those changes, but again, it's a very rough and ready kind of illustration. But the technologies that lie behind this shift have to do with technologies that rather mercilessly seek and reveal what is hidden. The printed book ushered in the end of the age of mystery. The camera exposes the secrets of the natural world. And the book that is also a camera is what we think invades our privacy, but also lies behind our bizarre assertion of a right to publicity. So just to give you a little bit more of an understanding of these notions and how they change, and I want to kind of get to this publicity matter. A mystery in Christian theology is what God knows and man cannot. A mystery was not like what Edgar Allan Poe writes. A mystery was immortality or conception. During the Protestant Reformation, Protestants considered mysteries to be pagan, and what was mysterious moved from church to state and from priests to princes, so that by the 17th century, a mystery was what the king knew and the people could not. That was called a mystery of state. The United States was founded in opposition to that notion. That's why we have a written constitution, because the founders of the United States opposed the idea of the mystery of state, the king's prerogative, the idea that the king ought to know things that the people could not. When we celebrate transparency in the United States in government or as necessary to a democracy, that comes because of this very important historical turning point in which mystery was abandoned and critiqued. The new nation's body of laws would not, like England's constitution, be left unwritten and invisible. They would be written down, exposed, as Patrick Henry said, to the public eye. That's why Americans celebrated in the beginning of the 19th century publicity, which meant something different then. Publicity used to mean simply transparency, to make something public. Publicity was a good thing. It was a good thing, for instance, to publish the proceedings of Parliament. Publicity in government would lead to better government. So, as Jeremy Bentham wrote in 1843, secrecy is an instrument of conspiracy. It ought not, therefore, to be the system of a regular government. When we talk about Snowden and Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, we are actually largely deriving our entire worldview from Jeremy Bentham. Bentham was the one who argued that the proceedings of Parliament ought to be made public, and also that ordinary citizens ought to be allowed into Parliament to watch those proceedings. This had an extraordinary influence on the United States. What Bentham was opposed to was what he called the partisans of mystery. This is their reasoning, he thought. You are incapable of judging because you are ignorant, and you shall remain ignorant that you may be incapable of judging. Bentham was a real hero in the early United States, and a lot of our efforts to make public the proceedings of government are derived from his arguments made in 1843. His arguments are why votes held in Congress are public, held up to the public eye. What's weird about the United States is that in the 19th century, Americans became obsessed also with privacy, with domesticity, with shutting the windows and the doors of their houses against the public view. Because by the 1880s, citizens began, for instance, voting even in privacy. This is a new thing in the United States in the 1880s. Even though Congress voted in public, we had the idea that citizens had a different kind of right to political privacy, that our votes should be secret. Before the 1880s, Americans voted in public, in the open. Your vote was known to all in the same way that it was known to Congress. That idea that there should be something very particularly private about a citizen's life was most fully expressed in 1890, and most famously by two Boston lawyers, Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis, who published this article in the Harvard Law Review, The Right to Privacy. They argued here that people had inherently, and essentially constitutionally, even though, of course, this is nowhere mentioned in the Constitution, a right to be let alone, a right to inviolate personality. What they meant here was that they shouldn't actually be bothered by journalists. The whole thing came about because Warren's wife and daughter had been harassed by the press. And Warren believed that although the votes of Congress should be held up to public eye, and in that sense publicity was a good thing, publicity for ordinary people was a moral wrong and a system of oppression. The right to privacy is an assertion of the importance of a veil from the public eye, and the public eye in this instance meaning the eye of the journalist. Warren and Brandeis understood very well that what they were talking about had not existed eternally. It was a consequence of modernity. It was a consequence of these very technological changes. For instance, the portable camera that made it necessary for people to assert a right to privacy and to defend it as something that was, in fact, part of their constitutional inheritance. Warren and Brandeis argued that the violation of this newfangled right to privacy, peering through keyholes and peeping through curtains, constitutes a kind of wound, a puncturing of the soul that might finally deprive men of their reason. The right to privacy they understood as a function of history. It had become necessary because of the shifting nature of journalistic inquiry, because of the shifting meaning of the very word publicity. I want to end with another clip that I think really well illustrates what I mean by this historical transformation that I think helps us to understand the nature of our anxiety about privacy and publicity today. H.G. Wells wrote this terrific novel in 1897 that's very much influenced by the sensibility that Warren and Brandeis elaborated on in their 1890 article, The Invisible Man. In 1933, it was made into this terrific film starring Claude Rains. I'm going to show you a very short clip. In this clip, the Invisible Man has hidden himself in an English country inn. He's begged the innkeeper to grant him solitude and privacy. We see, but the Invisible Man does not, that he is also fast losing his sanity. He's become violent, and the innkeeper has summoned the police.
Yeah, keep back, you kids there. Yeah, what's all this?
Keep back there.
Keep back, me? Do you know who you're talking to?
I give you a last chance to leave me alone.
Give me a last chance. You've committed assault, that's what you've done, and you can come along to the station with me. Come along now, come quietly, unless you want me to put the handcuffs on.
Stop where you are. You don't know what you're doing.
I know what I'm doing, all right. Come on. Get all of him.
Lock him up! All right, you fools. You've brought it on yourselves. Everything would have come right if you'd only left me alone. You've driven me near madness with your peering through the keyholes and gaping through the curtains. And now you'll suffer for it. You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? All right, I'll show you. There's a souvenir for you. And one for you. I'll show you who I am and what I
am. Look, he's all eaten away.
How do you...
I hope you can see the reading here that I'm going to give you that I hope should be obvious by now. In this scene, the age of mystery is over. Mortals here ascend the stairs to the heavens to see the face of God. They have exposed what was hidden to the public eye. They have peered through the peepholes, and they have propped open the door, and they have discovered much that was once mysterious and how it became secret, and now it is private. The story here, the real reason, I think, why the world is in such a panic about privacy right now, is that historically, the inviolability of the self has replaced the inscrutability of God. That is to say, what was once mysterious and known only to God as a mystery has become what we believe is in our own souls and must be forever hidden. That obsession, this notion of the inviolability of ourselves, having the same kind of stake as the inscrutability of God, has left us all slightly mad. To be seen, I think, here, the story of the Invisible Man, to be seen, to be always seen, to have a right to be unlimited, is to be finally nobody. Thank you.